and I can officially welcome everybody to this month's Lunch and Learn with TryBean, Francesca Amante, and myself. We are excited to have you as always. This is, and I will say this is my most requested topic in the corporate space, in the government space, in the nonprofit space, and pretty much any space that I have occupied. It is constantly, hey, do you do anything on burnout, stress, change management, and all of those other aspects that come on it? So I'm really excited to dig in to this conversation with my esteemed colleagues and subject matter experts, Terry and Francesca. Welcome. Let's dig in. What does burnout look like to both of you? That's how I'm going to start this off. What is your experience? Have you been burned out? What does that show up as energetically, emotionally, physically? Let's talk about it.
Francesca, give that a rip. I'd love to hear your answer first.
Okay, sounds good. Well, good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to have all of you here in the audience today. Typically, the way that I describe burnout is that there's two key players of the brain. There's the amygdala, which I always describe as the fire alarm. So thinking of the amygdala as the brain's, that fire alarm. Its job is to constantly scan for threat, for risk, for conflict, uncertainty, any social tension. I'm sure we've all kind of felt that at times. And it doesn't distinguish between a physical danger, a critical email, a disagreement, or a missed deadline. The amygdala, pressure is just pressure. And so when the alarm goes off and it detects threat, it activates our cortisol, our adrenaline, our fight and flight, our freeze response. And then there's the other part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So I always say this is like the CEO of the brain, and its job is to be the executive center of the brain. So it's responsible for strategic thinking, emotional regulation, long-term planning, decision making, and specifically perspective and empathy. And this part of the brain, obviously, as leaders, helps us to pause before reacting, think through complexity, and see the bigger picture. But the problem, of course, as we all know, is that during burnout and when stress is chronic, that amygdala just takes over, and our rational thinking, our empathy, and our curiosity of what else could be going on kind of goes out the window. So for me personally, of course, like any of us, we're human. I've experienced this many of times. And this is why I love this work and why I'm so excited for this conversation, is because burnout doesn't necessarily go away. We kind of have to make friends with it and figure out how to work with the burnout. So that way it doesn't remove our intelligence and make us feel like we can't function, but that we can work with it and say, how can I make burnout my friend? So that's kind of my little intro into it. How about you, Terry?
Oh, I'm going to have to dumb this all the way down because I barely understood anything you just said, Francesca. Now, I'm kidding. I loved that explanation, but it's so different than mine. Mine is burnout is I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that topic can apply to so many different aspects of our lives. We can be burned out from relationships. We can be burned out from work. We can be burned out from expectation, some of which we put on ourselves. And we can be burned out from just the day to day grind. To be fair, I don't experience a lot of burnout because I don't allow myself to get in a situation where I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when I do, I change it.
I love that, Terry. And that's going to be a big part of what we're going to talk about today is how do we shift? How do we change? But let's ask the audience, burnout, what does burnout feel like to you? What is that stress? How do you react? What does that look like? I can share with you from mine. When I'm feeling burned out, it kind of turns me into hyperfixation. And where I end up going is just like, I kind of look at it as if I'm burned out, I get tunnel vision completely and just a relentless pursuit of whatever it is that's probably burning me out. So it kind of turns a little bit into motivation for me, but probably not in a healthy way. And this is one of the things that I've had to adjust is because when I get hyper fixated or anything else, I'm not widening the lens. I'm not looking at the bigger picture. It is just a relentless dog in pursuit of the bone. And that's not always a great way to operate. So I've heard the opposite where people, and I'm seeing some of that come in, shutting down, wanting to do nothing, completely drained, low energy, low care, disinterested, low energy, empathy kind of shifting, anxiety and negative self-talk. So the problem with the opposite side of that, and for those that are fixators, is that you will tend to just continue to do this until you burn yourself out more and more and more. And I want to talk a little bit about what Francesca said about burnout not being the enemy. I am so tired of hearing all of these different all of these different sort of trainings and conversations of go drink some chamomile tea, take a bath, go take your vacation, and then that'll resolve your burnout because that is 100% BS. At the end of your tea, you're still going to be angry. At the end of your bath, you're going to get up, feel cold, and get pissed off about whatever it was that did it in the first place. And at the end of your vacation, you're going to come back to a pile of stuff on your desk, and all of the frustrations that were there are going to be sitting there and waiting. I'm not dismissing self care. Please don't take it as that, but that is not the antidote to burnout. What have you seen? And let's talk about just generally on this. Francesca mentioned it as an early warning system, which I 1000% agree with, because usually burnout comes first and then the worst things come second. Burnout's coming to say, hey, if you don't do something about whatever these tensions are, heart attacks coming next, strokes coming next, low metabolism's coming next, whatever it is, low immune system's coming next. It's literally an early warning system so we don't get to that space. What are some signs that each of you have noticed that are kind of the preceding to burnout? Something that's like, hey, this is giving me an indication that I need to do something. I'd love to hear that from you all. And maybe this is something that we can look at and go, huh, when we see this, that might be an indicator. What are your thoughts?
When I get
Terry, do
out
you want
of
to kick it away?
Yeah, I'll take this one. When I get out of my natural state, and my natural state is kind of cool, calm, chill guy. When I get easily irritated, when the same things start frustrating me, when those frustration levels start to ratchet up higher than normal, I know that that's what's coming, right? And again, I recognize it and I adjust. Um, Jay, you and I have had some conversation about somatic reactions inside of the body when all of a sudden you can start feeling some tension or some nerves bundling or that pain in your back that showed up and you didn't do a ding dang thing to have pain in your back. All of those things are signs that something is building that is screaming for your attention. And boy, oh boy, if you don't give it your attention, yeah, man, you're going to find yourself in a hospital bed pretty soon.
Well said, Terry. Want me to go? Yeah. Okay. No, I definitely agree with Terry. And I think the thing is too, like depending on what our elements are, which I know we'll dive into later in the call. For me, I'm a high fire backed by water. So the early warning signs may relate to any of you that have a similar sign. But for me, with my elements, I notice that I'm thinking about a conversation long after the conversation's over. I feel responsible for how someone else is feeling, keeping everyone happy or at peace. I find that like conflict or tension between people drains me a lot easier when usually I'm like, oh, well, that's for them to figure out. I go into problem solving mode. I say yes to help people even when I know I'm already overwhelmed. Often will be like a sense of feeling hurt or disappointed or discouraged when my effort isn't acknowledged, when normally I'm like, oh, I'm doing my best. How other people respond, it doesn't matter. But when you're in that state of burnout, you don't really feel that way. And then I think a big thing would be isolation. I'll be on a walk and my normal inkling is to pick up the phone and just call a friend or call my coach or whatever that may be. And it's like I struggle to actually make that call and I'll have to push through to make the call. It's normally when I know I'm not being myself. And then just slightly withdrawing and starting to kind of go inward, which of course, funnily enough, one of the major causes of burnout is isolation. So the two kind of are a vicious loop. But those would probably be my biggest indicators that I'm slipping into a state of burnout.
And see, I love it. I love that you took the somatic side of things and Francesca kind of took that other sort of like how she's showing up or what it is that's kind of going on in that internal space. For me, when I'm burned out, I and I don't know if this is a result of some of the neurodivergence or whatever else, but like my understanding and or acknowledgement of emotions around me completely gone. It's everything becomes tactical. It is a tactical strategy. It is this, it is this, it is this. I think this is a big part of why, like in high stress situations, this is why I do some crisis communication and crisis management with organizations and people, because in a crisis, almost any of that emotional side just shuts off. And then it is okay, logic, structure, systems, like my earth and my fire probably go through the roof. And you heard me say that right. My earth and my fire, because I get systematically dogged when it comes into something like high stress, high anxiety. It's just like, nope, dot the I, cross the T. We're going to go through this list. This is the structure. This is the system. So, yeah, of course, my air is still playing around in there because I like to solve problems. But yeah, in those moments of burnout, I would say that I really heavily lean into earth and fire. I go very individual and very tactical. And when I start to realize that I'm not asking myself the questions that I try to ask, like, how is this affecting my team? How is this affecting the people around me? How is this going to affect? If I'm not asking those questions, that is my first early warning signal that I'm starting to get into burnout. And that's really served me. So this is one of the reasons why it's like, all right, it's time to reset. It's time to manage what it is. So,
I think, Jay, I think it's a great time to kick it over to Francesca to have her explain exactly what each of those elements represent. You invoked earth and fire, but if not everyone knows what that means, it's a real good time to clear that up. Francesca, take it away.
well said, my friend.
Sounds wonderful. Of course, team. Happy to do so. So for anybody in the audience that may be new to this or just want a nice little refresher, I know that we all, the three of us, always love that from time to time. Fire is driven by achievement, by progress, results, momentum, and they bring a lot of energy and action. But under high stress, fire tends to overwork. You'll find that a lot of like control outcomes. And I know for myself, it's like I want to control the situation, even though that's control is simply a perception. We push harder, take on too much responsibility, and we kind of believe if I just work harder, I can fix this. And so a lot of our burnout triggers as high fires is that we carry too much responsibility, progress really slows down, we feel really stuck, and then success becomes very unclear. It's like, well, what is defining our success? Um, for a water element, where water are motivated by connection, belonging, support, harmony, and they really build trust and community. So under high stress, water is going to tend to absorb other people's emotions. I've been guilty of this too many times. Avoid conflict. Hello. Extend to help others, overextend to help others, and take responsibility for group tension. So they kind of believe everyone else is okay, I'll be okay, which of course goes to the burnout trigger, which water burns out when emotional labor becomes overwhelming, relationships become strained, or they just feel unappreciated. And of course, that's where one of those burnout signs of resentment starts to come in. For the air element, the drive to learn, the strengths are more so curiosity, insight, strategy, understanding. Terry is one of our high airs. He's exceptional at all of these, and they bring a lot of perspective and clarity to any project at hand. Under stress, any of us with air in us can feel that we can tend to overanalyze, we can withdraw, maybe delay some decisions, or get stuck in those thinking loops and be like, let's just brainstorm this one more time. And the way that us as heirs can sometimes feel is if I understand this better, the problem will resolve, which of course can bring us to the burnout trigger when heirs will burn out when the problems feel too complex, information overload occurs, and decision kind of pressures us even more to make a decision. And then finally, with the earth element, and also I'd encourage any of the audience, if you feel any of this, put your element into the chat to say, hey, I relate to any of these statements. We'd love to hear from you. And lastly, the earth element, the drive to defend. So the strengths are stability, protection, structure, and fairness. They create reliability and safety no matter where they are. However, under high stress, Earths tend to become very rigid, resist change, protect their territory, and shut down emotionally because they believe if I just hold the line, things will stabilize. And of course, that brings us to the burnout trigger for them. Earths burn out when systems feel unstable, when change happens too quickly, and trust erodes. So that's my synopsis on that. I'll pass the baton back to Terry and Jay.
Thank you for that description. And as always, love hearing the different ways in which you apply the actual, like, hey, let's get everybody kind of on the same page and you apply to the topic at hand. So, love that. I want to follow up on what Francesca said, though. What is your element if you've taken the assessment? And if you haven't, you can take it for free. We are happy to give that to you. But what is your element? Toss it into the chat because this is something that behavioral elements kind of accidentally fell into. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Did not realize how good behavioral elements was as a diagnostic tool for burnout until literally I was doing burnout with a group of nurses. We had about 75 nurses that were on the call. I had had them take the assessment. And then when I had started to look at all of their profiles, it was something that I could predict very, very, very accurately exactly what it was that frustrated the bejesus out of them. So, to what Francesca said, and I just did this actually recently with another group, where I'm like, all right, let's start with this. Errors. You get burned out when you're doing the same thing over and over again. You get burned out when you're not able to collaborate. When you get burned out when you're not able to think and you're just told to do and your autonomy is stepped on. Earth, you get burned out when people are violating the rules, when people aren't following processes or procedure, when change is happening just for change's sake, or because there's a CEO that comes in and just says, let's change everything. Why not? Today's Tuesday, and you freak out because of that. Fires, you end up burning out when you're not hitting your goals, when other people are stopping you from hitting your goals, when you're not winning, when you're not necessarily driving whatever results or passionate projects that you want. Waters, you burn out when you feel like you're being disrespected, when you feel like that the team's conflict is all happening so quickly, and you get burned out by carrying the emotions of everybody else that's around you. Look out into the room and go, how'd we do? And everybody's just like, huh. So I love that you bring that up, but I want you to think about that. If you've not taken the assessment, take it, because more than likely the patterns that we represent, and tell me, audience, if I just went through your elements, are we close? Did we land on a few of the things that really trigger you or bring you about? Right. So this is a powerful tool as us to be, hey, what's happening in our world right now that's creating the three major conditions? And I want to talk about this, team. So I'm gonna toss this over to you in a second. Burnout oftentimes is not the amount of work that we have. This is a really key indicator. Okay. Because we think about it as like, oh my God, I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm totally burned out. Okay. Interestingly enough, biological science tells us that it's not the 16 hours that's burning you out. What is burning you out is one of three big factors. And I'm going to kick it over to you. I'm going to say what the three factors are, and then I'm immediately going to kick it, no explanation. The three big factors are resentment, isolation, and I'm tossing these into the chat, and purpose or lack thereof. I'm kicking it over. Terry, Francesca, when you hear that, and I know that you all are familiar with these concepts, when you hear that, it's not the amount of work, it's resentment, isolation, and purpose. What are your thoughts when that comes at you? When you hear that for the first time, second time, third time, whatever, what do you think?
For me, if it's a lack of purpose thing, I am out, right? Like the why to me, the why behind things is so important. And I'm sure that that's my curiosity and my air and my search for meaning and creating impact. But the resentment shows up maybe like if there's not enough appreciation for the things I do. I might translate that into some level of resentment or find resentment for the person who's not doing the appreciating. The isolation, don't care. And it's crazy because my water is my secondary. And my water is higher than a lot of people's primary element. I have high water. But I like, man, put me in a box, leave me the hell alone. I'm super cool with it for periods of time. I've never exhausted my loneliness. So maybe there's a level I just haven't hit it yet. That is not an offer for you to take me and leave me in the woods, Jay. I just want to be clear about that.
So well said, Terry. As I'm looking at this list, it's interesting because when Terry said that, I have to just echo his point. What's interesting is that for a very long time, I lived by myself. And it, you're spot on, Terry. It's like the being alone isn't the thing that makes you feel lonely, right? Like I can be by myself and I'm perfectly content. If in fact I probably operate a lot better. At the same time, though, I think what ends up happening is that in the midst of burnout, because there's so many other factors at play, and because a lot of the things that typically make us feel like ourselves have gone down in levels, then that's where the isolation starts to come in. It's not that you're alone per se, it's just that you kind of feel alone in your struggle, is maybe what it is. And you kind of feel it's almost like a shame, blaming, guilt. I don't know if anyone in the audience can feel that when you're feeling burnt out. I know I've had friends say, I don't want to talk to other people because what I'm going through feels so insignificant. But at the end of the day, it is significant. All the things that we go through are, and we might be surprised if we reach out to somebody or talk to a friend, they might actually really relate. And that's where that power comes in. But when we're in that state, we kind of just feel like nobody's going to care about what I'm going through. I'm over exaggerating. I'll be okay, or whatever that may be. And we just kind of push harder and harder. So that's kind of where I feel sometimes that would come in. I think the resentment, spot on to Terry. I think that there's aspects, and depending on where I'm working, there are certain teams I've worked in. It's not like there's a lot of acknowledgement but it's very clear that the work is appreciated, so it kind of balances out. I think it's just once it slips into such a burnout level, then any lack of acknowledgement, like Terry said, you kind of feel like, okay, are they not seeing me? They're not appreciating the work I'm doing. And the last one, purpose. I think that's probably the greatest indicator. I'm seeing this even with my mom and dad as they're getting older, and my mom's taking care of my dad. They both right now don't have a purpose. They don't really know what they're doing or why they're doing it. And as they start to find their purpose, and whether it's a couple grounding things that they're doing every day, or even for myself, if I have my non-negotiables in place, that's my purpose, my drive, my why, is that I'm not doing all these things because they're making me a better person, but it's fueling the human being I am today to get me to where I am tomorrow or in 6 years for the impact I'm wanting to create. That's my why. And if I lose that anchor of what my purpose is, I agree. The burnout really slips in hard. So I think that the purpose or the lack thereof is a huge component. In fact, what I feel is probably the strongest prong of the three.
I, I like what you said in the distinction there on the isolation side of things too. And I saw that Chris had said it, and Stuart, I see you. I got the trifecta. That's pretty funny. Um, when we think about isolation, because there's the physical isolation, right? The physical isolation, lock me in a box. I will go into the woods, physically isolate for 10 days, and the physical isolation doesn't necessarily create the conditions of a burnout for me either. But I will say that there are points and times when, and maybe it's just like, maybe I'm alone on a decision. Maybe I'm alone on a project, or maybe I'm alone in a way of thinking, and everyone around is maybe thinking something different. I think that that can be a little isolating. So, kind of to Francesca's point, the feelings of being seen, valued, heard in some cases could be more of that isolation even then, because we've got some people that are in remote work situations where they don't see another human being the entirety of the day. At best, they're going to get an email, a Slack message, and a call, and they don't feel isolated. They feel connected. And then I've seen people that are working in an office who feel more isolated than any of the remote teams that I've seen. So I do think that there is something to be said about, yes, proximity can play an aspect to it. I think some of that emotion can play an aspect to it. And I think sort of just the thoughts, the logical thoughts of like, wow, this is up to me and I'm completely by myself. That's probably not my biggest one. I think my biggest one is the resentment side of things, is that I will go to resentment. And it's not, and this is a nuance that I want to bring into resentment. It's not always resentment towards someone else. Sometimes it's resentment towards myself. And I think that that's probably where I hit the largest aspects of burnout. It's like, how did I get myself into this? Or just like, why did I not learn this in advance? Or why didn't I do this? And I know that that comes from the fire side of things, of like that sort of drive to mastery, that drive to perfection. But I would say that that can be really, the resentment can be external. Like if you have a boss, and this is where I'm thinking in terms of resentment, right? Let's say you've got a boss who cares about you, compensates you incredibly well, you've got great benefits package, always looks out for you, advocates for you, rewards you and recognizes you, and that boss says, "Hey, we've got a huge project that means everything to the company. Can you come in on Saturday and Sunday to help us get across the line?" You're probably going to be like, "Yes." And you're probably not going to have a lot of resentment to it. Versus you working for a boss who doesn't have your back, who's constantly undercutting you, who's taking credit for all of your work and not giving you credit. And that person says, "I need you to come in on Saturday and Sunday for this project." If you choose not to, well, that's one thing, but we all worry about whether or not we're going to be gainfully employed the next day. So if you choose to, or even the ask, I don't even know if it's whether you choose to or choose not to, just the ask itself is probably going to breed resentment. So I think that there's one of those things where it's like, depending on the context, depending on how isolated we feel, depending on how much purpose there is behind it, I think these three things can really play into each other in a meaningful way. So, for our last half, and let me ask this to the audience. Bye, Lisa. Let me ask this to the audience. If you were to take whether it's purpose, resentment, or isolation, what one really stands out for you? Is there one that stands out, two that stand out? Like, what would how would you look at it? Mine's obviously resentment. Francesca, did you say was resentment or isolation? I know Terry said purpose. What was yours? This for Francesca, and mine's on that resentment side. All right, I see a couple of people coming in with resentment for sure. Isolation for Stephanie. What else do we have here? We got resentment, isolation. All right, Cheryl's purpose, mix of all three. Great. All right. So here's what we've got to be thinking about is we are all in high stress environments at some point in time. That could be work environments, that could be home environments, because burnout can occur at home too. Burnout can occur in social circles, burnout can occur in the workplace, in the professional side of things. So let's start talking about how do we either manage and or lead change in those stress states. And I'm going to kick it over to Terry. When you find yourself working, let's say that you're working with a client and you've got a big client and you see different teams that are burned out. Maybe it's a mixture of those three different aspects. How do you help them? What does that look like? What do you talk to them about? How do you sort some of these things out? And I'm going to ask the same question to you, Francesca, because I know that you've worked with teams in that same space.
I'm pretty basic, man. I'm a cause and effect guy, right? So I'm always trying to isolate what was the cause because we understand what the effect is, but what led us to it, right? And, I don't need to go all the way down to root cause necessarily or five whys, but those tools certainly help because once we understand what is putting us in that situation, then we can make a decision as to what we're going to do to choose something else. And if you mentioned, and we all have mentioned, this could be a relationship thing, this could be a home life thing, this could be a work life thing. Sometimes these things can't really be changed, right? If my wife is a significant cause of my burnout, well, I either have to have a really difficult conversation, have to have a real difficult choice, or have to suck it up. And there are times when sucking it up is the only answer. And so sucking it up to me means, all right, you've made a decision, you made your bed, you're going to stay lying in it. How do you turn this from something that zaps your energy to something that feeds your energy? Maybe you gamify it. Maybe you look at it differently. Maybe you remember the good things that brought you into this situation and you change what you focus on. Wayne Dyer said it best, something to the effect of when we change what we're looking at, we change what we see. And so often, what we're really dealing with isn't the reality, but the perspective we hold on the reality. So if we dial into what that perspective is, I think we can change it. We are far, far more resilient, far tougher, far more able to cope and deal with things than most of us ever give ourselves credit for.
Amen to that. I absolutely love that. Francesca, I'm going to ask you the same question. How do you end up addressing this? And I'll kick that over to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, the example that I'm going to use specifically was regarding in the development space. So when I worked on, say, like I was overseeing like 4 or 5 large scale developments for luxury real estate. One of them was like 103 lot subdivision. So we were working with 5 of the top builders. They all have a very innate sense of purpose in their work, even when it comes to the contractors, the engineers, everything like that. Purpose wasn't an issue, and certainly isolation wasn't either because they were constantly surrounded by their team. But what I really found that the core observed metric was definitely resentment. So their effort either was not recognized or appreciated. Expectations were constantly increasing without additional support. Responsibilities were high, but control over decisions was limited. Workloads expanded while resources kind of stayed the same. And problems were escalated upwards, but solutions were expected to come from the same few people repeatedly. So a lot of the signs of that we ended up seeing in the resentment aspect in their work environment were just like frustration and communication between trades and leadership, less willingness to go above and beyond, and just some subtle disengagements from collaboration and a shift from pride in the work to feeling taken advantage of. And so for myself and another project manager on this project, within about 6 months working with them, we were able to shift the culture substantially. And within about a year of the 5 years we were on the project, it was like night and day. However, we really had to dig into that resentment piece because literally if one builder stood on the driveway of another builder's property, it was like this big hoopla, and it ended up being that within a year they're all at each other's ward ceremonies cheering each other on, being like, I knew you could do it. But what really ended up happening was we had to address that resentment piece, and it's amazing how much that can bleed into the space. And I think sometimes it's like us taking a step back and really asking ourselves, what am I resentful on? And typically there's a bigger root cause. There's usually a why behind the why. It's not often what we think or perceive it to be. So that was one of the main things that we ended up working on and addressing, and the results were wonderful.
I absolutely love that. And it definitely echoes what Jennifer had said in the chat about getting close to burnout because things keep piling on. We're asked to do more with less, or we have, hey, I know that I've asked you to take on these extra projects, but I just have this one more thing that you can, etc. And then it often feels like that is not accompanied with gratitude or support or, whatever other resources. It's just like, and this is a big part of why in delegation, like if you're somebody who delegates a task to somebody else, it is so essential to do the why. Why am I delegating this to you? And why goes in two directions. Why is this a value for you? And why is this a value for the project? And if you're able to delegate with those two things in place, you've just added purpose. Then making sure that you are acknowledging, recognizing, and rewarding. If I delegate something to Terry and we're in front of the board and I'm using anything of Terry's work, or even if I'm not, just I want to give a recognition to Terry. I asked him to take on an extra assignment at the 0 hour without any guidance, and he stepped up like a boss and was able to put some really, really important things together for me. So, can we just all take a moment and acknowledge Terry's efforts and energy that he put into that project? So, thank you, Terry. I really appreciate you. That's the kind of thing where the person now all of a sudden gets that dopamine hit and gets validated for the extra effort, the extra energy, the getting called on at the last minute, resentment tends to fade from that perspective. So now I've addressed two of those things, and by default, I've probably made Terry feel like he belongs and he's included. I've just nailed the three trifectas of burnout. And sometimes I look at this and I think that it's easy. And then I realize that I screwed up and didn't do it. Or I realize that I missed the boat on something, right? Like knowing something and doing something are very, very different. So it's time sometimes that we have to take that step back and really kind of take an acknowledgement and go, hey, Francesca, I noticed that you really stepped up for BE Academy. I just want to tell you how appreciative I am because I wouldn't have been able to do what I was going to do if you didn't do that. Thank you. I really, really, really appreciate that. And doing that in a way that's meaningful and authentic and, brings that person sort of in there. Um, so I really wanted to echo what you both had said there. I think that there are ways and tactics for us to make sure that we're getting people out of isolation, getting people out of that sense of lack of purpose and getting people out of the sense of resentment by just some simple human tactics. So let's talk about the elements, right?
I want to take a
Oh, go ahead.
little deeper dive into that because the order in which we present the value, whether it's the value to the team or the value to you or the value to the project or the value to the mission, really matters based on who we're actually talking to. Right? If you're having this conversation with someone that's high water, you can actually lead with the value to the team. This is going to be useful for all of us because, as Francesca so eloquently stated, they're really big into harmony. They're big into teamwork. They're big into collaboration and everybody getting along. So we can start there. But if you bring up its value to the team, to an earth person or a fire person that are high in either of those, and that's your starting point, it's not going to land the same. So I feel like we should have that discussion to drill this down a little bit. So, Francesca, do you want to go ahead and kind of finish that thought process? It
Nice.
totally called you out. Called your high water out right here, right now. But your
I
fire's higher. Get it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, Terry, you're spot on because it's like, it's us trying to speak I'm Italian. It's like us trying to speak Italian to a wonderful group of people from Japan. It's not going to land. We're not translating the same language, right? And I think one of the things that Jay said so wonderfully, and Terry, you had echoed this, was it was like maybe two or three BE lunch and learns ago, and it was something to do with like we could be speaking the most succinct message, but if we're not speaking in a way that someone else is going to understand, it's just we're both standing there looking at it going, why don't you understand me? I don't feel seen and heard, but they're both literally saying, hey, I appreciate you in two different languages. So Terry, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. And it's funny because if I go back to that one particular development project that I use as an example, before myself and the developer partner came onto the project, there were five other long-term phenomenal realtors that worked on the project, exceptional people, very talented. The only thing was they were speaking a different language to that development project. And there was some kind of miss in translation that it didn't land, whether it was for sales, for culture, or for any of the burnout piece. And so sometimes what it is, and I think that one of the things I know that Terry does, what Jay does, and many of you in the audience probably do too when you're in that discovery phase, really figuring out who your client is or who you're speaking to. This could be a client, this could be your partner in your life, this could be friends, or this could be your business collaborator. If we do not do enough discovery of what matters to them, what's the language that they speak, how is Terry going to feel seen and valued, what are the reasons or the cause for Terry's burnout, if we can identify this first and foremost instead of us guessing and fumbling our way through, which trust me, we've all done, I've done it the best of times, but when we're able to learn from that, go back back and say, okay, I'm going to really get to the base of what's the foundation that's going to build this house on a solid ground. That's where the game changes. Because if not, as we know, we're building on sand, it's going to sink, it's going to fall. And then we wonder, well, what happened? I was being so clear, but clearly we weren't, right? So that's kind of my perspective on that. And I think for any of you in the audience, if you're thinking about a friend that you're wanting to connect with better, or your boss, or your partner, or your business collaborator, I want you to take a step back and don't think about what matters to you. I want you to start asking yourself, I wonder what element they are. Send them the assessment, the free one, and kind of get to know what is it that matters to them and what are their trigger points. And that's really where the game changes. How about you, or how about Jay? What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. And it actually really leads into let's take a look element by element and talk about maybe some tactics that we could look at, both to resolve our own burnout, but hey, maybe we're working with that high water. How could we best create the sense of belonging or connection, or what could we do to sort of elevate that space? And why don't we go in reverse order? So we'll start with water because we always, end with water with it being, at the alphabet. Um, and I'll lead off. So I want your perspectives here too, but since I'm kind of popping this up, we'll go in reverse order: water, fire, earth, air. Tactic for water. I'm going to share one that I would say is probably one of the most impactful ones I saw when we were doing some of these studies in the healthcare space is when a water is burned out, oftentimes it is related to the isolation, the feeling of aloneness, the feeling of not belonging. And one of the things that we studied was a tactic that we asked nurses to reach out to somebody that they had not connected with in at least 6 months. Okay. This could be a friend, this could be a family member, this could be anybody. We told them no, no ex relationships because that's just going to blur the lines. But we said, please reach out to an old mentor, an old teacher, an old friend, somebody that you haven't talked to in at least 6 months, and start a 10-minute conversation with them. We ended up doing this twice because the first time, and I've never seen anything like this, 100% of the participants reported feeling instantly better and a reduction of the symptoms of burnout. We did it a second time and the results were the same. And what we ended up concluding from this is that when we are in burnout, we get a feeling of isolation. We get a feeling of we're being pushed to the extremes. Reaching out to somebody outside of the echo chamber widens the lens and makes it feel like, hey, the world is actually a little bit bigger than just this one spot that I'm stuck in. So that can be a really powerful, quick hit to that oxytocin system, which may be what is being violated for that water element in burnout. Terry, Francesca, any thoughts to add? What other tactics would you suggest for?
Okay, perfect. My question that I want all of you waters in the audience to ask, or to ask someone who is a water that's really overwhelmed, is this my responsibility or is this someone else's experience? Because waters often carry emotional weight that was never theirs in the first place. I know I'm guilty of this all the time. And having those honest conversations early, if us as waters that tend to avoid a little bit of tension, which causes more stress to accumulate, which is that vicious loop, the resilience requires us asking what needs to be said that hasn't been said yet and address the issues early. And the last thing I'll say for water, because this is huge, the recovery time's massive. Are you getting enough alone time or quiet time? Are you having supportive conversations, or are you doing activities that refill your well? Because if we don't refill our cup, we've got no water to pour into anyone else. How about you, Terry?
Mine's so similar to yours, Francesca. I am a big, huge fan of taking other people's baggage from them, right? Because we're all carrying way too much. So I'm really happy to take this off of your plate, off of your shoulders, off of your back, and set it down. I don't need to carry it. It's not mine to carry. You didn't need to carry it either. So I'm going to take it and then I'm going to set it down. I used to tell all my clients, man, what we need to do is take some of this garbage that you're carrying around, put it in a little box, compartmentalize it, stuff it in a rear corner of your brain. You're welcome to visit it whenever you need, but stop carrying it into every room you walk into because that type of stuff shows up before you do. And so if you don't want to compartmentalize, fine and dandy. Just set it down. Go visit it as needed, but don't bring it with you everywhere you go.
Amen, Terry. Well said. Well said. How about yourself, Jay? Are you already shared yours, right? Yeah. What
He's
element are we doing
super
next?
watery.
Oh, fire. I love that. Okay. Jay, do you want to kick us off with fire since you're the highest fire of all?
Fire away.
Terry, go ahead and then I'll go and pass it to Jay.
My fire's reasonably low, right? I'm like just a normal in the fire department. But I think what happens for fires, and I'll let you two correct me as I if I misstep. I think burnout comes from repeated effort and not sustainable or even quantifiable result, right? Like when fire gets in the mode or in the flow and it's just going after it, if they're not getting what they expect to see happen, whoo, child, I think that's where burnout really starts to happen for them. So your options, in my mind, are step back, engage your air, look at the situation, see two or three or four or five different angles and approaches that you could take, and try again. Or, and y'all ain't gonna like this one at all, lower your expectation. So those are choices.
Yeah, I feel that. So Terry, I'm going to share with you. I've learned a lot from we have one of those Roomba type room cleaner things, and I learned a lot. We call him Randy. And Randy's great at what he does, except for when he gets stuck and then he just keeps going and just bashing his way. It's like there's a wall there, Randy. Go around the wall. Why are you running into the wall, Randy? Just go around it. Just and he doesn't. And when I looked at Randy, I was like, "Oh my God, that's me in some places." And I had to take that step back and literally go, "Okay, sometimes we need to pull back just a little bit, enough to see the entire landscape and say, do I have to do it this way? Can I do it a different way?" So it's great advice. And sorry, that's kind of embarrassing, but it is really funny. And I know this about myself. The second piece, I literally can't stop giggling just thinking about that. The second piece, and this is a power for a fire, is oftentimes is because we're not winning, we're losing, or we're not getting the results, or we're not getting the results that we're expecting, wanting, etc. So what I would say is if you have the ability to not just step back from the project that you're working on, put energy into something where you are able to get a quick win. Get that quick win, get that dopaminergic hit. You're activating your fire, you're activating your passion, you're activating your motivation. Find the next quick win, find the next quick win, and get back on track. It is pretty well documented. You said the word, Terry, was flow. It's pretty well documented that when we're in a state of flow, we have an easier time continuing in flow. Whereas when we're in a state of sort of stagnation, it's easier to stay in stagnation. So find a quick win, take that win, and then keep building upon that. Francesca?
Well said, Jay. The new quote is be like Randy. So for the I would say for fires, like the priority reset is huge. Asking ourselves weekly, like what are the three most important outcomes this week and what can wait? Because I think fire burnout often comes from doing too much, not doing too little. And then also too, delegation discipline is going to be a huge factor for fires. Fires often believe I'll just do it myself. I love Stuart in the audience. He's always so transparent and open. He's a high fire and he always like it's just easier and quicker for me to do it myself, spoken like a true fire, and we can all relate at times, right? So the resilience is going to come from asking who else can grow by doing this, and what am I holding on to that someone else could own? Because delegation is really going to restore our capacity. And I think remembering, Jay says this a lot, so does Terry, so do myself. delegation is a gift because at one point someone else threw us into the fire or threw us into the deep end to say, "Hey, I'm giving you this task, go crush it." Had they not given that to Terry, to me, to Jay, we would not be in the career positions we are today. So if we can let go of something as a fire, it'll not only relieve a little bit of our burnout, but we're also gifting someone else. So that's mine.
Love it. All right, so we're going to dig into Earth next, and we've got short amount of time here for the Earths. I'll toss mine out there real quick. Generally, what it is a loss of stability, a loss of systems, a loss of process, a loss of control or reliability and predictability. So, one of the things that I would say is put the Earth brain to work in burnout, and don't necessarily get into the analyzation of all of the different data points. Give yourself a step by step process. First, I'm going to do this, a simple one. First, second, third, fourth. And just give yourself that quick step of saying, here's the four things that I'm going to do. This is the order I'm going to do it in, and act. And then give yourself another four steps and another four steps. Building mini processes is not going to take as much analytical brain time, but it's going to give you some of the reliability and security that you can move forward with. Hey, at least I know what my next four steps are. At least I know what my next four steps are. So that's mine for Earth. Terry, Francesca.
All
I
you,
have
Terry.
such a hard time relating to anything Earth that I don't know that I have much to add to what you said. I love that answer, although it sounded like a fire diagnosing an Earth's problem, if I'm being completely honest, right? That was how do you build some wins and some structure there. Um, yeah,
It
so
was
I'm
a fire answering for Earth,
it was
but
it was
it's the
very fiery.
systems. It's the
It
systems and
was
the reliability that's the important aspect. It's the
I love
win
it.
that I added on to the end of
I
it.
love it.
Love it. Okay. Thank you guys. Okay, so I think for Earth, because Earth needs stability as an anchor, asking yourself what part of the situation can remain stable, even if something else has changed. That's going to be, or even if something else excuse me, allergies. Thank you. So even if something else changes, what about this can stay the same so we can have an anchor? And number two, voice our concerns early. Earths often stay quiet until stress builds and they kind of explode. So the resilience is going to require asking yourself, what concern do I need to raise now before it grows larger? Those are my two.
Beautiful. All right. Last one, the air element, obviously Terry's domain. Terry, why don't you lead us off on this one?
Create. Go make something that doesn't exist. Something that's going to feed your soul. Something that's a project that you've wanted to do for a long time and thought about numerous times. Go start. You don't have to finish. Let's be honest, you weren't going to finish, but go start. Let's go.
It's so funny that you say that. I was sharing with Francesca the other day. It's like when I'm feeling like at my best in the workspace, it is when I'm like get in and I've got time to create something, to build something, to do something. And I know that's my secondary is air, and it's exceptionally high. As you said earlier, your water's higher than a lot of people's primary. That's kind of where my air is at. So that does fuel me, and that's something that absolutely drives me. I'll share mine, and then I'll kick over to Francesca. Um, there's small things that we do that we tend to find ourselves doing the same thing over and over, even if you are a high air. We may be ordering the same food at a restaurant. We may be driving the same way home from the gym every single day. And you can actually practice building out your air or experiencing something new simply by changing one of those consistent patterns that you have. Say that, hey, the next 5 times that I eat out, I'm going to get something different than what I got previously. Or the next 3 times that I have to drive home from the gym, I'm going to take a different pathway every time. Activating new scenarios, new experiences can help us draw us back into that space of feeling creative or feeling more innovative. Francesca, what you got?
Absolutely. I think the biggest reminder for errors is that clarity often happens after action. To Terry's point, go do something, create something, step, just make a step. So asking yourself, what is the next best step, not the perfect answer? because I think this kind of prevents our analysis paralysis. And number two, just a thought download. Write down everything on your mind and then categorize it. Maybe you have some actionable items. Maybe there's informational, and then there's stuff that you're like, this is not necessary, but that's cool that we're journaling about squirrels and pine cones that I see outside. And once we're able to do that, it kind of clears that cognitive overload and allows us to make that next best step.
Love it. All right. We made it through all four elements with 3 minutes to spare, team. Great work. Let me take a moment to say thank you, audience, for stepping into this. Francesca had asked for people to toss into the chat what landed for you today, what resonated. I saw some of the answers coming through. It seems like the framing of the resentment, the isolation, and purpose really landed for people. This is why I see a lot of burnout programs that are not really effective, is because it's not addressing the core causes. It's addressing the symptoms, which is the exhaustion, the depletion, the emotional energy, etc. But in reality, we all know that burnout and stress come from somewhere. And they're both actually activating aspects. They're early warning systems that tell us that we need to do something. So I encourage you, and kind of my last statement to the audience, I encourage you, if you're starting to feel burned out or stressed out, ask yourself, what am I feeling resentful about? Am I feeling isolated or that I don't belong? Or am I feeling that I'm not living with purpose? And I bet you're going to be able to find an answer and be able to address it. So Terry, Francesca, any last words from you? And we only have that 2 minutes, but I want to hear from you. What are your last words?
It would be awesome if you two had a program. Any chance that you guys ever do any workshops on this? Just random question from an engaged audience member here.
That's very kind, Terry. Yes, Francesca and I co-facilitate the Burnout Management Program, which is a 4, 6, or 8 week deep dive into big issues, reclaiming joy, reclaiming energy. Thanks for the nod. If you are interested, you can, of course, reach out to Francesca or myself. We do have a program that's coming up here in a very near future, and we'll be happy to get you that info. What a kind thing, Terry. I appreciate you. So. Francesca, any last words from you?
Alrighty, then my last words will be also reach out to Terry because he's got a plethora of incredible programs too. I mean, if you need anything, reach out to Terry as well. But no, Terry, thank you for that. And we just want to say thank you to each of you for being so vulnerable and open and honest in the chat, giving us so much from all of you so that we can, bring as much value to you as possible. My last words would just be if you are feeling any form of burnout, reach out to someone, call a friend, or just start to just take a step, whatever that may be, or go for a walk. Just don't stay stagnant in the energy you're in. Just make a step forward and just know that the three of us are here anytime if there's anything that we can support you through.
All right, this is my final word. This is recorded. I did see a couple of comments in the chat. It'll be up on YouTube so you can watch it again or catch up on anything. And of course, as they both said, reach out to any of the three of us. We are here to support you and engage you in any way that we can. So until next month, be safe, be healthy, be well, and thank you so much for joining this month's Lunch and Learn on Stress and Burnout. Take care, everyone.